Hello, welcome to episode 2, I think, of Life After the Locker Room with myself, Mike Island, and himself, Tom Burridge. Say hello.
Morning, everyone.
There you go. Well, it depends on what time they're watching it. If you're
Well,
watching
that's
it in the
quite,
morning,
yeah. I'm
wind.
a morning podcast listener, Mike. I'll be honest with you. I only exclusively in the mornings, as of about 30 seconds ago. Yep.
There you go. So what we're trying to do on this here show is we're going to talk about people's careers, how the highs, the lows, all in betweens, and then what they did when their career was coming to an end, or if their career is coming to an end, or anything to that. Because a lot of people talk about, get into sport, get into that all sort of thing, because it's great to make friends and get physical, get fit, all that sort of stuff. But what happens when you can't or you don't want to anymore? And that's what this series is about. So, Mr. Burridge, today is your show, my friend. So, talk to me. I mean, American football, how did you get into it?
Yeah. So, look, American football's it's weird thinking back to kind of the start of my American football journey because it feels like it was forever ago. Look, I much the same as many of a certain age. My first exposure was on the TV. It was Channel 4. I remember vividly, staying the night with my grandparents, come down early in the morning, this great big box of a TV. There's no remotes. You're sitting about 3 inches from the screen, pressing the button.
Pressing it and hoping for
That's
the
it.
best.
Yeah, click, click. What's next? I'll take a minute for the picture to emerge. All of it. So, so I remember sitting there and I flicked on and it was there was showing highlights of the game and it was a little bit grainy and the colour wasn't great and all the stuff you get that time of the world. But it was a 49ers game. I forget who they were playing, and it was Joe Montana. He threw the ball, and predictably Jerry Rice at the end of it runs it in. I'm like, do you know what? That's pretty cool. I like that. And it looked fairly simple. It was just like run, throw, catch. All those simple things. So I remember I watched the end of that, and I started getting interested. And of course, there's no resources at the time. There's no internet or Sky or anything like that. So I went to the library and I had a look at books and stuff. And it kind of. Yeah, imagine that. Actually, going to the library,
going out and doing things.
Yeah, crazy. And so, yeah, it was in the background for a while, and it kind of over the course of my childhood, I guess it kind of reared up on occasion. There were a few times where you'd encounter it, and I'd be a bit of an outlier because everyone would be like, "What the hell is this?" And I know a little bit. Then I remember in secondary school, as part of a public speaking exercise, they were like, "Oh, talk on any subject you like, but try and make it different. We don't want everyone standing at the front and talking about their favourite football team." So I'm like, "Okay, well, no one else is going to talk about American football." So I remember going through this big book and pulling out bits, and I remember standing at the front of the class, telling everyone, hiding behind your paperwork as you do, because no one likes to public speak. And then my teacher was like, "No, put it down and speak from the heart." And I'm like, I've sort of told you everything I can remember. And I just had this memory of a little fragment that talks about how much tape they use. So I sort of put this thing down and awkwardly shuffled on the spot. And instead of looking here, I was looking down at the ground. And I started talking about how much tape they used. And then the teacher was like, "That's really interesting. How do you know all this?" And then we got into a little conversation about that. And so it was in the background for a while. And it was when I mean, a lot of people will say the same thing these days. But when I got to university, I was talking to a friend of mine who was on the same course with, sharing a few classes with.
Which uni is that?
This is Nottingham. So, yeah, Nottingham proper, not Nottingham Trent.
Is there a rivalry there then?
Yeah. Well, there was one in my day. I don't know about it now, but yeah, back in my day, it was a little bit needle.
I love the shudder.
Yeah. So, yeah, Nottingham Uni. And yeah, like I said, a friend of mine on the same course was like, you should. He started mentioning he was part of American football. I think he was wearing one of the, the club hoodies that everyone wears when you're at uni. And I got talking to him. I'm like, "Yeah, I know a bit about it. Always been interested." He's like, "Oh, you should come down. And I kind of that first year, I was very introverted. I still am a bit shy around new environments. So I thought about it and then did nothing more with it. And it was kind of the second year he nudged me again. I'm like, "Do you know what? I'll give this a crack." So I turned up. And yeah, started running around and tried to find a bit of a niche and yeah, fell in love with it. And yeah, I always remember I went to the university sports hall where they were dishing out the kit. They just had these big stations of kit, and I walked in there and didn't know anything about it. This was after the first session, So I walk in and you're confronted by people, and one or two of them vaguely recognise me from the session a couple of days ago, and they sort of point me around, and you pick up the kit, these shoulder pads that look like they've been through car accidents, a helmet that must have weighed an absolute ton.
We've all been there.
Yeah,
Master 5000s.
That's exactly right. It's an old bike helmet that I think must have, I don't know, must have been through the Second World War or something. Knee pads with chunks missing out, just the whole thing. I remember coming out there feeling fantastic, feeling like I was equipped for battle. It was a very energizing thing. And for somebody who, through my younger years, even now, I'm not a small bloke, but I was always the big fat kid, and I was always the one that picked last for athletic things, because you don't have the stamina and you're a bit of a liability. So to rock up and for someone to tap me on the back and go, "How much do you weigh?" And I sort of hesitantly go, "Quite a bit." It's like, fantastic. Don't lose any of that. We can use that. That's brilliant. And you just think, I've not heard that before in a sporting context.
No.
I get a bit of it from rugby. Oh, you're a big broad lad. And then they see I can't run around for very long. And used to have this joke that I would collapse during a rugby game and they'd get me my prescription ambulance to give me a breather for a bit. But yeah, now for somebody to say that it just sort of, I don't know, it gave me a bit more impetus and sort of said, you know what, maybe this is something I can do and I can get into. And as you kind of get into it, I remember it being, you learn more and more and more. And the confidence really builds, more so than probably any of the other sports that I was involved in. And I dabbled in all sorts of things, but that was the first time I'd really felt like I could add some value.
So what was it? Sorry to jump in.
No,
I mean,
please.
you said that, early on, you fell in love with it. Was it just because it was a sport that you enjoyed, or was it because you were realizing a dream that you had as a kid, or was it the people? What was it that made that kind of got that? I like this before you got the kit on.
So I think there were two things. So one was the people, and it wasn't necessarily who they were, but it was just the ethos that they brought. And I think American football is more than any other sport something that you have to respect and trust the people around you. You need them for your own success. For the if the wide receiver can't block, then there's every chance the running back isn't going to get yards. There's no other sports that are quite so interconnected in that way. And I think these guys realized when I rocked up, they're like, okay, here's a guy with a bit of size. Here's a guy who might be able to help us. And here's an opportunity for us to coach him up to add value. Because I think they realized that you're only as strong as the weakest link. And that's obviously, massive cliche, and the sport's full of cliches like that. But they wanted to help me succeed, in part because they had some vested interest themselves, but they wanted to build out this team to be as successful as possible. But I think the other side was, as I mentioned, I'd struggled with my weight. I was not particularly fit. I tried hard at things, but often my ceiling was much, much lower than everyone else's. And once I started this, I'm like, do you know what? All the things that I'd previously considered to be disadvantages actually are helpful here. And this is the first time I've been able to really apply that. And don't get me wrong, being a big fat boy, your feet aren't quite as quick as they should be. But now I know I can work on that rather than someone going, do you know what? You could do with losing a bit of weight and you'll be all right.
Just run around.
That felt that felt a bit disingenuous. I know that's right, but at the time when you've been struggling, you've been on diets your whole life, it just feels like a bit of a kick in the teeth when someone says that. Now somebody goes, no, your size is fine, just polish this and improve a bit over here. That was something, again, a message that hadn't been conveyed before, and it resonated with me to a point where very quick, 3-4 sessions in, university, you don't get a lot of time leading up to that first game often if you're a true rookie, 3-4 weeks worth of stuff.
University, the front end, for anyone that doesn't know, University American football, from a standing start, because I was helped out coaching at the Uni of Chester, you have to get taught, number one, what American football is, how to wear the kit, where to stand, how to do your job, and then 4 weeks down the line, you're playing. And that's the reality of it, isn't it? From a brand new rookie, you go from race, set, go, bang, and you're in. So that was your was that you say your second year?
It was my second year at university, yeah, and I got stuck into it.
Did you watch any of the games?
No, I didn't.
Or did you come in like, how do I stand? How do I do?
Oh yeah, completely. No, I mean, when they told me, okay, we think you know, so straight into offensive line. So they started me at right tackle initially, which was fun. I enjoyed that. And then I think then they kicked me inside to centre because we lost a couple of people, and they were looking for somebody willing to, young and impressionable, who would do it, and that fell to me. But yeah, I had seen it, so I wasn't coming in like, what is this? Teach me the mysteries. I was coming in going, I sort of see the mechanics. But I didn't know like how far apart your feet were supposed to be, where you are in relation to other people, all of the specifics. But I think because I had watched some of the sport and I knew some of the mechanics of it, I like to think I was a bit of a sponge and did sort of absorb a lot of this fairly quickly. And I think some of it came, as it does, some of it came a lot more naturally than others. But it was something that I think quite quickly, like the first game I kitted up for, like you said, it was probably 3 or 4 weeks after I'd rocked up.
Short. Yeah.
It really is. So and our offensive line at the time was relatively well established. There was, I think, all 5 of them were returning players at the time. And I didn't get on the field that first game. And I remember the coach came over to me afterwards, or the O-line coach came over to me afterwards. And he said, listen, normally they charge I think it was a nominal $5 match fee or something to cover food or entertainment or something afterwards. And he said, look, I'll cover yours because you didn't get on the field, but we'll make a real effort with it next time. And the game the next week, I started and never not started since then. That was the only time.
Spin your brain back, put yourself back in that starting spot. You're out there. Were you still right tackle, or were you?
I was right. I started at right tackle.
So
it was
tackle.
Midway through that season I came into centre.
You're lined up against that end, first ever offensive play. What was going through your brain? How did you feel?
I think a lot of people will come and go, oh, I just didn't want to fall over. I didn't want to do. I don't think I ever kind of thought that way. I spent ages trying to learn playbooks and trying to figure out how plays worked. And that first season and a bit, it was just, I play this position, I do this job, and it was very myopic. And if they'd taken me out of that early on, I'd have been completely floundering. It was only kind of later on I realized you've got to learn the concepts and overlay that. So right at that point, I remember going down in the stance and going, I have to do this thing. And it just sort of almost clicked into like being a robot. It was, I need to do this, that command's come in and do this. I couldn't tell you what the play was or what my assignment was. Don't remember any of that. But I just remember thinking I was going to be nervous or a bit afraid and just being very kind of mechanical and disciplined with it. So it was that. So that second game was the first game I played. I think we won that game. I think it might have been against Warwick or somebody obscure. And then it wasn't one of the powerhouses at the time, because at the time, if you're Nottingham, you're always poking over the fence to Loughborough. That was who we cared about. It was just just down the road at Luga Baruga. They were the ones we sort of had an eye on, I think, and sort of compared ourselves to at the time. And of course, this was a team. Nottingham at the time, this was pre the new kind of rules in university football, and so the 2 Nottingham universities actually had a joint team. It was Nottingham Outlaws at the time, and it was combined Nottingham University and Nottingham Trent University. So we'd have one training session a week at our gaff and one at theirs, and so you're constantly begging and borrowing lifts off people, trying to work out bus routes and all that kind of stuff to get to practices. Whereas now, of course, that they have to be distinct. This sort of conjoined Nottingham team did quite well in that first season, and in no small part, I think, off the back of a fairly well experienced O-line and me. So just sort of filling a void. And then we had a centre at the time who was fairly unreliable, or at least it felt that way. I think he sort of had he was an older guy, sort of later in the student life, and he didn't rock up to a lot of training sessions, and people were forever talking about going and getting him out of bed. And it was funny that the interior of the line, you had three good players. And one was called Fish, one was called Bunny, and one was called Bull.
Love it. Love it.
Just, we had a receivers coach whose name was Thumbs, and because apparently he played opposite a fella called Fingers, and they just neither of them could catch the ball, so he had Fingers and Thumbs playing at wide out. All really classic stuff. But yeah, this Bunny was the guy playing centre, and he played a few games. And listen, he's great. Look, from what I could tell, he was a great player. But there were a few times he didn't turn up, and they were like, "Look, we need somebody who can fill this void." And so they asked me if I'd do it, and taught me how to sort of snap in the simplest of terms. And there I sort of stayed, and kind of I was there for the following year, and then finished my university career, and sort of wondered if anything would come of that. And I remember coming home. So I lived in, or still do live in Essex. And at the time I was out in Frinton, which people will Google and find to be nothing more than a retirement village on the coast. And so I came back there with my parents, my family. And I was sort of thinking, well, maybe this is the end. I did a bit of research, and Ipswich, which was probably an hour away from Frinton, had a team, and I was ummed and ahed about that, and it was purely coincidental at that point. Colchester, which is where I live now, it's about half an hour away from Frinton. They had a bit of history with American football through the 80s and early 90s, and they had disbanded when the bubble had burst and the funding had dried up, and they then were talking about reforming, and this was 2004. They just had a reunion game, like an anniversary celebration, 20 odd years on from their formation. And they played against the local university, and some of the old boys had put the kit on and gotten a bit of a taste for it again. And so they were looking to reform. And I thought, do you know what? This is a chance to get on the ground floor. So I went along to some of these preliminary meetings and spoke to some of these people and just tried to get a feel for it. And then we went along to the very first training session, and you got this sort of O-line together with one or two old boys. There was me, who played at university, and just the generic big fellas who rocked up on the day. And I remember the coach at the time saying, "Does anyone know how to snap?" And I kind of gingerly put my hand up and said, "Yeah, I could do it." And you see one of the old boys go, "Oh, thank God, now I don't know how to do it." Okay, should I not have volunteered for that or no? I don't know, but yeah.
For the folk out there that don't play offensive line, you see, everyone else that plays it, the other four just have to block. And so whenever someone says who can snap, the normal thing is for everyone to take a step back, leaving whoever hasn't heard the question to step. They're stood there going, "Oh, for God's sakes," because no one wants to do it. No one wants to be a centre and have that responsibility of throwing the ball between the legs. They just want to stand there. They want to do the job, block, and that's it. But it's always happy if someone goes, "Yeah, I'll do it." Everyone goes, "Really? You're weird." So that's just for a bit of context.
Yeah.
But how did it feel? Because, of course, in university ball, you live on campus, you see all your pals, you're training a couple of times a week, you've got that. Then there's the two things, is you're having to leave that team, because that effectively, that ends. It's not like you're leaving because you want to, it stops.
Yep.
So how did that feel? And then how did it feel going into like an adult team? I know they were new, so everyone was kind of new, but how did those two things feel?
Yeah, I think, look, I had got to I had reached the end of that university life in many sort of ways. I was kind of ready to move on from it. So for me, I enjoyed the football aspect. I played a bit of rugby. I played a little bit of hockey. Tried to play cricket and a few other things. So I kind of dabbled across the university experience a bit. But from a lifestyle perspective, I was ready for what lay ahead and ready to move on to something else. And I think I kind of grouped all of that kind of university experience together. So I liked the team. I enjoyed playing with the team, but I had to leave that behind because it was time to move on from everything else. So there wasn't this big emotional farewell. I think you saw within the team that transition. It happened every year. There were people coming and people going, and it was just my time to go and leave it to whoever was next. And so it wasn't yeah, I didn't have any problems with that. I think coming to the new team, there was some more trepidation. There's nerves, as there always is in that environment. But I think I'd grown up playing team sports, whether it's rugby, whether it's cricket, whether it's hockey, whatever else. So this was just another team sport, and I think it gave me a bit more confidence for a shy fat lad when you walk into an environment where.
Nope. Tom, you've just cut out, buddy. You've cut out. We've both cut out. No, I'm still broke. I think your headphones have died. Your headphones have died. Let's see. Hang on. Hopefully we can salvage. No, you're still muted. Let's see if we can. Sorry, boys and girls. Hopefully. Oh, no. I think we'll try our best, folks, to get this back. Hang on. In fact, let's go a little bit old-fashioned because I have pen.
Is that
Yes.
working?
Yes, you're back on.
That's random. My computer just muted me. There you go.
I didn't know if your headset, because it looks. Is it battery? Is it?
It is, but it's just told me it's got high battery, so it should be fine.
Anyway, this is what we're what we're working with.
For now, I'll see if I can find a cable for it at some point.
So anyway, going into the new team.
Yeah. So and look, I think you're surrounded by groups of people. There were sort of three distinct groups of people. There were there were sort of 4 or 5 of us who'd maybe come from university and had a bit of a background. There was another group who were the old guard, the 40-year-old, who they'd been around the sport previously, but coming back from a hiatus and were trying to work out if they could still do it. And then you had the complete rookies. And so I was coming in with a bit of a background in sports, with a particular background in this sport, albeit, relatively brief. And so I think I sort of came into that relatively confident, relatively kind of ready to see what the next stage was all about. And I don't know that at the time, the landscape's a bit different to now. There wasn't the social medias, there wasn't the online presence of these sorts of clubs. So you didn't have opinions of what these clubs were, and you didn't have the scouting. Back then, filming a game was virtually unheard of. It's really weird to think how far that's come in the last few years. But at the time, we had no scouting of people. It was just somebody went along with a notepad to a game or whatever and scribbled down what they could. So
First Down magazine. That was that era.
Exactly. It was very much so. Very much so. And so, I didn't know enough to be nervous about it, I guess, with where it came from. I went in fairly open-minded. I'd already made contact with a few of the people. I'd attended a few of the meetings where they were talking about reforming and getting back in the league. So that was interesting.
How
school field.
Did it take for you to sort of settle into playing again then?
It was a couple of weeks, I think. It was probably 3 or 4 weeks of training to get the measure of the people around me, to get a feel for the coaches and how they wanted to engage with players. And I guess from centre, we had quarterback who hadn't played for a long time, coming back under centre and trying to work out that relationship, making sure that exchange was there. So there were a few things to sort of think about, and they all gradually fell into place. I don't think it took as long as I necessarily expected it to. And the playbook was quite simple to start with, so that helps. Break me in gently. It took a few weeks to feel a sense of comfort, but very different environment. You're not training as often. You don't feel like you can shout at people when they didn't turn up, because when they don't turn up at university, it's because they're hungover, and when they don't turn up at in Britball, it's because they've got a job and a family, and it's harder to yell at people.
That's true.
So those dynamics are a little bit different. But it took a while. But culture still, like I said, trying to reform, trying to get back into the league. And I had our first game It was a pre-season friendly home against what was the East Midlands Saxons and became the Peterborough Saxons, and now don't exist. But yeah, East Midlands Saxons, and they came down. I think they were looking to blood a few new players and trying to get them going. So our veterans actually turned out to play quite well in that game. I think they adapted into the match environment quite well. Sort of picked up where they left off. We won that game 7-6. And it was called off with about 10, 15 minutes, I think, to go. Somebody got injured and ambulances came and all sorts. Not one of ours, one of theirs, unfortunately. But yeah, so, I mean, moral victory, I suppose, to some degree.
I was going to say you would have probably met Mr. Fryer without realising it there.
Oh, yeah, quite possibly. Quite possibly.
Because there's a few. We've got Russ, we've got Johnny, that were all at the Saxons. And it's kind of weird that there's an awful lot when you start digging on this, because Fryer was talking about like going back in, and he said, there's people now that I know that I played against, I didn't have a clue at the time.
Well, that's it, yeah.
Which is kind of cute. So, yeah.
It's funny, I go back and look at some of the photos I've been tagged in over the years, and I'm like, hang on a second, that's Russ Paulson about to run me over. It's like, I do get some pictures like that. So, yeah, it's funny. Look, it's British American football is such a weird and wonderful place. People sort of spread far and wide, but the connections and the people that you get to meet, the kind of the friendships that form, it's extraordinary how they develop over time. It's quite
cute, isn't it? And that's the thing, is you can, because it is still it's a niche and a minority sport of sorts when you compare it to like rugby, football, and all that other stuff. So you do get to know a little bit of everyone in your sort of like little local area. So but yeah, so you're in your first season with the Glads. They were the Gladiators all the way through.
They've always been the Gladiators as far as I've been aware. Yeah, they've sort of bounced around locations a little bit. They're sort of always Colchester and surrounding areas, but there was a merger with Redbridge back in the 90s, and yeah, so there was sort of moved around a little bit, but yeah, always the Essex area, and yeah, mostly around Colchester. So yeah, so we're there, and this is first league season was 2005, I think it was. And I remember first game we went away to the Essex Spartans, who played at the time it was a school AstroTurf that was honestly
proper AstroTurf.
It was carpet that might have been 5 mil thick on top of concrete, and so falling over was not advisable. Yeah, that was quite something, and we lost that game by a point. Yeah, that was tight. Was it Aaron Griffiths? I think it was playing in that. The old Spartans had a purple jersey, I think they played in. I'm pretty sure he was playing quarterback, and he just sort of ran around us. Yeah. It was purple at the time, I think it was.
I don't remember. Well, that was it. I was Northwest. I was Chester. Yeah. So I knew the ins and outs of all the like the Northwest people, but everything. That's the thing, like you say, because there's no social media back in the day.
Nope.
Anything that way, it was just literally if you saw it on First Down or if someone mentioned it, you go, okay, I'm sure it's fabulous, but I didn't know anything about. Unless you saw them in like they were in the playoffs, and then they were a bit of a big deal. But yeah, it's just I would never know they were purple.
If you weren't one of the big London teams, or like you say, you weren't in First Down. Or the other thing that emerged probably a year or so after for me was I don't know if you remember the unofficial forum that was on the BAFA forum, and you sort of my extent of understanding of the North was there are 3 or 4 people who like to talk in the North on the forum. That was about it. I mean, I didn't know much about the teams at that point.
Yeah, that was it. Jeez, that was a powerhouse, because that was effectively the start of social media, wasn't it? There was a little
early days of that. Yeah.
So you could chat and give someone a little bit of abuse that you're about to say.
Yeah, you don't know who people are, but you know what the handles are. So you go, okay, I know that name, and so sort of emerges later. Hang on a second, I play against this guy, but I didn't know who. Yeah, so that was quite an experience, but it was quite entertaining actually at the time to to see how others were talking about the sport and how people were reacting and talking about the way the sport is developing and the governing body movements. So you find a little niche there and a sort of a group of kind of, it's like a weird group of friends. We're just sort of having this chat in the background. We don't really know who anyone is, but you're sort of interacting and you've got this shared interest. So it was very, very strange dynamic, but it was fun. I remember having that window open while I was at work and just waiting for the weird and wonderful responses to fly in.
Everyone had it. I used to just sit back and watch the chaos, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
So
it was fun.
2005 Gladiators. Did you play all the way up to 2023, or was there any gaps?
I played all the way up to 2024. So yeah, last year was the last year. No gaps. No, I probably missed in that period maybe 5 games total, mostly being out the country. I missed 1 game through injury. And that game I called the offense that game and we won that one, which was nice. So I'm 1-0 as an OC.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
very
you've lived your
throughout.
life basically from, it is effectively, it's 20 years.
Yes.
At the Glads. And any career highlights? Any big wins? Any bowls?
A few. Yeah, look, there's, you know as well as I do that you play in this game long enough and people get to know who you are, or you sort of thrust yourself forward. You get various opportunities. With the Glads, there've been a few. So look, there's some real highlights. That first season was really fun. Chance to do something that I wasn't sure I was going to be able to do, first and foremost, with actually a really good, quite humble group of people, because a lot of them are those veterans. They're coming back. They're under no illusions that we're trying to win championships or that they're world beaters. We want to have some fun, and we want to play hard, and we want to try and do this again. So that first season was really fun. We got to the Division 2 final in 2009. Had a pretty robust team there, and we lost an absolute cracker of a game against Leicester Falcons, as was up at Doncaster, up at the Keepmoat. So yeah, Saturday night under floodlights, just an unbelievable game. We lost it 33-32 when the PAT that we went for with 3 seconds to go hit the post.
No.
Yeah. And we came off the field, and you're like, do you know what? Hindsight's a wonderful thing. We'd been running the ball really well. They weren't able to stop the really heavy inside run, particularly. It was always good for sort of 3 or 4 yards. We just thought we probably should have gone for 2. But then if you go for 2 in a final and you miss it, everyone's going to say you should have kicked it, right? The kicker had been a bit of a metronome all season. It was just, the snap wasn't quite there, the hold wasn't quite there, and that resonated off the post. You can still hear that twang.
I was going to say, you can put yourself back in there and you can hear that doing.
Oh, I can. Yeah, I can. But listen, it was an absolutely brilliant game. It was one of the better games I've been involved in. Really exciting, really fun. So that was great, albeit we came up the wrong side of that. And then 2013, we got another chance at it, this time up in Leeds, the John Charles Stadium in Leeds, against the Gateshead Senators. And again, we had a really good team that year. Particularly in the run game, we were a bit special, I think. And yeah, we ended up winning that quite comfortably. Lovely moment in there. You can find it on YouTube. I think the whole game's on YouTube. But yeah, we got a kick-off return with this starburst return that we'd installed, and just when it comes off, it is just a thing of beauty. Just the Red Sea parts, and they get faked out completely. And our kick returner Ash Latter came charging down the middle of the field and scored. It really something special. So that was fantastic. And then most recently last year, so 2024, again we're in Division 2 and find our way back to the final. And where were we last year? We were in Coventry, and against Sandwell Steelers, a very well-equipped team, really good bunch of guys, and we snuck out of that. Was it 12-0, I think, in the end? So so a couple of championships was lovely, and then look, there's been some opportunities outside of the Gladiators that have been really good. Really, it's fantastic to be able to to apply the skills and meet up with different groups of
Vegas,
people. Right?
didn't you?
I've been to Vegas now. I've played in Vegas 3 times now. So
Really? Oh wow.
yeah. So once most recently with your good self. So as part of the Sealand team. Yeah, that was quite the experience last year. Really, top notch to be able to do that with such a fantastic group of people. And then prior to that, 2015, I played in the same game. So this was the minor league Hall of Fame game out there, which was fun. So yeah, that was. I mean, I have somehow found myself in the minor league Hall of Fame. I'm probably the least deserving person to have got that. I think I ended up talking to a few people who had found themselves inducted, and my wife said, "Well, you should be in that." I'm like, probably not. But she wrote an email to Dick Zeus it was then.
Dick Zeus.
Yeah, and he very quickly replied saying, "Fantastic, sounds like a great candidate. Let's get him in." I'm like, well, do you know what? I'll go and I'll be part of this and I'll get my ring and famous speech and everything else. So, listen, very, very privileged to be part of that. But yeah, a little bit embarrassed at the same time. Probably don't, plenty of other people far more deserving than I. And then prior to that, I was a very cocky young man coming out of university who felt like he knew everything there was to know about the sport. And I went over to Farnham to the PA nights under Steve Rains, who I have an awful lot of admiration for. I think the guy's he's a really impressive individual. We don't always see eye to eye on everything, but there's an awful lot of respect there. And he took me as part of that PA Nights team to Vegas to play against Team USA. And yeah, I didn't contribute a huge amount in that one, but it was again nice to be part of that with a different group of people, a really interesting group of people. Some guys in that team who I've made really good friendships, good connections with, and yeah, really privileged to be part of that. So yeah, and look, knowing Steve a little bit since then helped me. When he became head coach of Great Britain junior team, I sent him a message just congratulating him, asking him if he was looking for staff, and he said he was. So I came in and helped on the O-line for GB juniors for a couple of years, and we went to Poland and the Netherlands and Serbia and all sorts of places. And yeah, real privilege to be a part of that for a fairly short period. But look, I'm very fortunate. The sport has afforded me an awful lot of opportunities, an awful lot of the chances to go to different places, to meet different people, and to be part of some quite interesting and exciting events. And most recently, obviously, with Sealand, being able to travel around and play with some, again, new people, but people who are doing it for all the right reasons, all to have a bit of fun and AFC jolly on the beers, right? That's what we're all about.
I am kind of curious though. The other 2 times you went to Vegas, did you win?
No, we didn't. So, no, so with Farnham, I think it was closer than probably we all thought it was going to be. I can't remember the score, but I think it was something like 14-12 or something like that. Somebody will remember and correct me. But I remember us being probably within a score. And yeah, the Hall of Fame game we played against. I think it was against Team Colorado, but it might have been Team Texas or somebody like that.
Yeah. And
yeah, that was an eye-opening experience. There are some people out there who I think they're involved in football, but you listen to them speak and the way they approach this, and you just go, I don't know if you know as much about this sport as you think you do. There's some really nice guys. Like I think I remember talking to the head coach, who ironically was on the sideline when we played last year.
Oh right, okay. Who's that?
So it's a guy called Tony La Barbera, and
what a name!
Yeah,
what a name.
So I said hello to him. He didn't remember me at all, which is perfectly reasonable, by the way. I'm not the most memorable character. But I said hello to him briefly. But I remember him getting like, okay, Americans are a different breed. They really are. Like pre-game, he turned up this was back in whatever it was, 2015. He turned up and he started giving a bit of a rah-rah speech, and no one was really responding to it. And then what he did was he pulled this fistful of raw beef mince out of his pocket. And he said, "You all know me." He said, "I'm a vegetarian, but this is what I'm going to do for you." And he jammed it in his mouth and started eating this beef mince before a game. It's like, I don't know if that's supposed to be like, what am I supposed to do with that? Am I now excited to play because you've just not been a vegetarian? Like, what do I do with that information? So, yeah, I've never been one for.
How did everyone else react? Did anyone else go, yeah, or did they all go?
There were a few who thought, there was a couple of people burst out laughing, but a lot of them were like, yeah, this coach is going to do this for us. I'm like, okay. If you say so. It was honestly the weirdest experience. I don't really. Yeah, at some point, one of these days, I'd love to have a chat with him about what he was thinking at that point.
What was that all about, Tony?
Yeah,
maybe
it's worked for him before. I don't know.
Maybe he just carries mints in his pocket all the time, just in case there's a rah-rah speech.
Yeah, you never know when you might need to make an ad hoc burger. I don't like what are we doing here? Oh look, I've stumbled onto a barbecue. Just so I have my pocket mints. Here we go.
The other side of it is what would have happened if they'd all got riled up anyway, and he didn't need to do it. He just had mints in his pocket, and it's like, how did your day go, love? Well, can you wash my trousers for me?
Yeah, I brought it back. Yeah, stick it back in the fridge for next time. Like, what are we going to do with that? So yeah, that was very peculiar. But no, I've had a lot of very, very good opportunities with football. I'm very grateful for everything that's come to pass, and it's been a lot of fun.
So tell me, so you said you played till 2024. It's obviously it's come to the bowl win. Very, very nice. Tell me about the start of that season, because obviously, for the folks that are watching, you've since retired at the end of that season. Tell me about the start of it and your sort of mental journey coming from the first training session to how you felt at that bowl win when you go, that's it.
Well, it's funny you say that. So I at the end of that game, at the end of that bowl game, I hadn't really planned to retire, I don't think. I mean, I had it in the back of my mind that it was coming, and I think my mindset throughout the course of last year had been, it's been a bit strained, I guess. The sport was starting to take away from some of my other life, if you like. So I've got a young family. I've got 4 kids. I've got a wife who I love spending time with. I love doing things with all of them. And I found that I was starting to get to a point where the sport was taking away from that. There were trips that we'd like to have done or holidays that we'd planned, and I was the reason that we were either not doing it or cancelling it or curtailing it in some way. So that had been in the back of my mind for a while. I've also found, I think that having been in the sport for a decent period of time, often as the constant in that O-line group, I suppose, for want of a better phrase, I'd always been there. I'd been the person that could be relied upon. They got to the point where they knew I could turn my hand to pretty much any of the 5 positions if needed, to varying degrees. But I'm not going to pretend to be a particularly good tackle against a speed rush, but if you needed someone to run block, I could do that from just about any of the positions. And so what tended to happen is as people kind of churned around me, a lot of the focus was about getting them to be functional. And so we'd often have rookies or new players or guys who didn't understand our system or whatever it might be. And I just felt like a lot of the coaching, by necessity, by the way, was geared around get these guys ready to play. And a bit like I said earlier about the Nottingham experience, it was about get them to a point where we know they can add value so that the whole is greater and stronger. But it meant that I felt, and this is going to sound very sort of selfish, but it felt like I didn't feel like I was pressing on and developing. I'd sort of plateaued, and I was there to make up numbers. And whenever you missed a training session, there was always a challenge. Oh, well, now that impacts the rest of the team. And you know that, and you're letting the running backs down because it changes their timing or it changes the angles that they run. So there became a bit of sort of obligation to be part of the training, to be part of the all of the prep work, and it is very encompassing. I find, and this might be unique to me. I don't know how other people do it, but when I'm thinking about football, when I'm gearing up for games, it's on my mind all the time. It doesn't. I have moments where it's not top of the list, but it's always there. I'm always thinking about it. Like I'm at meetings at work, and if somebody's talking, and my mind will wander, and I'm drawing up plays, or hang on a second, I've just thought of something. Let me flick back into the film. Let me draw up some notes. Let me message the quarterback. Let me talk to the runner. Are you happy? So I'm doing all of this in the background, and no one's asked me to. I just feel like people talk about you prepare in different ways, and I guess that's how I prepared. I just sort of immersed myself in it. And so it is. I found it to be quite all-encompassing in that respect. And after a while, that is a little bit draining. Right, by the end of the season,
Okay.
I'm ready to put that down and say I need a bit of a break and switch off for it for a bit. And I think I've done that now for 20 odd years. I was at a point where I was sort of burning myself through. And like I said, you come to the training, and there's not a huge amount of comment for me. There's not a lot of development work for me. Yeah, there's a little bit, but I kind of weighed it up. Am I getting back what I'm putting in? I'm not sure I was at that point. And so anyway, I here's the thing. I love the games. God, I love the game. There is nothing like it. Going out for that first snap and making that contact, coming off the sideline, talking about it, making the changes, outthinking the people around you. Something about that just flicks my switch, really does. So you kind of reconcile the fact the training is a bit of a drudgery at times with the fact that I do this because then I get to do that, and I'll tell you what, that's where the fun is. So yeah, back to your question. So I finished last year, big celebration, really enjoyed it. Great achievement. People will say, "Oh, that's not the Brit Ball, it's Div 2," and you're right, it was Div 2, but that's the league we were in. Yeah. We won the league that we were in. There's no reason you shouldn't celebrate that, right? Yeah. So that was fun. So I came back. So actually, at the start of this year, so 2025 pre-season, I came back, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna persevere with this because it's worthwhile, and it's a chance to sort of test myself again in Div 1 and sort of play some teams maybe we haven't seen for a while. And I came back, and it kind of, the enthusiasm was waning, I think, personally.
That's what I was going to say. It's definitely for me. When I went, obviously I had a little session in Plymouth this year and then snapped and whatever. But it starts off as a niggle of, I'm not getting out as much as I used to. I'm not learning a new skill, now as I did. And it starts off this big until you actually, and I don't know if it's the same for you, but you kind of resent going to training because you go, yeah, what's the point? What is the point? So I don't know if is that what you went through, or?
Yeah, completely. So I said to people before that I didn't want to finish this sport resenting it because it had given me so much. Dogs going mad in the background. No, because it had given me a lot. So I didn't want to resent it, but I felt like I was a bit resentful of going to training and kind of getting to the end of 3 hours or whatever it is and feeling like this hasn't moved me on. Yeah. Might have moved the team. There were some sessions, don't get me wrong, everyone has a crappy session from time to time, and you just finish it going, geez, we'd have been better served not bothering to turn up. Yeah. But equally, there are some sessions where you go, do you know what, we talked about a play, we implemented a play, maybe we tweaked it and adjusted it, and by the end it was running really nicely. That's very satisfying. I enjoyed that aspect of it. But I think that was diminishing, and look, I was quite open with the coaches. I said, listen, I would like to understand what you see my role being. I've been centre for ages.
This is 2025. This is
2025. Yeah, I had said for the last couple of years I would really have liked to have moved back to guard, just in part to do something a bit different, have a different opportunity. So I talked to them about that. But yeah, the feedback I got was, listen, we'd really like to replace you and move on. I'm like, hang on a second. I feel like I could. Look, I'm an older guy. I'm not as fast as some. I'm not as strong as some. I get all of that. but I feel like I can still add something. You know, last year I was offensive player of the year for the team, which was really nice and, you know, lovely to win a personal award. But to then be told, actually, you know, time to move on, it's a bit of a kick in the teeth. And look, I completely appreciate the club wants to have a multi-year plan. It wants to move to the Prem. It wants to be competitive on a national stage. You know, most clubs want to do that. And I think they thought what they're looking for is to phase out some of the older guys, bring in some young core, young core talent to help drive that forward and be part of that for the next X number of years. And I'm not sure they looked at me and said, this is a guy who's going to compete at the highest level in 5 years' time. And listen, that's a perfectly reasonable stance. No issue with that. To sort of be confronted with the realization that maybe I can't, or their perception is that I can't add value anymore. That was tough, real tough.
Okay,
and you know, the conversation evolved, and it sort of became clear that what they were aspiring to was maybe I would, you know, start the season, but by the end of the year, I should be firmly ensconced on the bench behind people who have taken over.
That's pretty brutal to just be so bluntly honest.
Look, in some ways, I appreciate the honesty, because it meant I'm not fighting this losing battle, and I'm not trying to do something that I'm destined to fail at. However, if they'd have said this to me 10 years ago, the spark goes off and it goes, well, I'll bloody show them. And you come back and you're fierce, fit and firing, and you trying to prove a point. I heard Fryer talk about this the other day.
Go on.
Do I want to go through and justify myself in the team? A team that I've led, I have been involved with for 20 years. Do I need to prove myself? Look, I feel like every year you should prove yourself, but I feel like after a while, not just me, by the way, everybody, after you've proven yourself year on year, there's a bit of veteran dispensation, maybe.
Yeah. Well, you know, you can do it when
yeah,
you've proven you can do it for 20 years.
Exactly that. And I feel like right now I could still add value. I felt like I would still, you know, if I came back and got a couple of sessions under my belt, I would like to think I could challenge for a starting spot there just on ability alone. But would it be the right thing for the team longer term? I don't know. Probably not. So maybe it's the right thing for them to do. But I came into this season thinking I've got a couple of years left in me. I told a couple of the coaches I think I could give you another 2 decent years. They were ready to move on, and that was that. So in some ways, did it do me a favour? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe I walked away before an injury. Maybe I walked away before I did start resenting it. Maybe I don't know.
So go on.
It did feel a little bit forced.
Talk to me then about, because you say you use the word it's tough. It was basically, let's call it for what it was. It was a kick in the bollocks. How did it make you feel? If you could verbalize your feelings, your emotions at the time when someone drops on and says, you can start, but we're going to phase you out, mate. Thanks for your time, but we're getting the next, batch in. How did it make you feel? And I know it's hard to verbalize, but start from the start.
So, okay. I think just a complete jumble of feelings, and I think to the point where it was almost overwhelming. And look, I don't feel like I get befuddled in that way very often, but I left that session feeling just mentally all over the show, confused, like, what have I done something wrong? Where is this coming from? Frustrated. I felt like I could still do it. Felt like I had value to add. If nothing else, a bit of experience, maybe help some of the guys around me a bit more. Upset, feeling like this had been taken away from me. There was a little bit of me that thought maybe I could prove them wrong, but kind of to what end? And do you know what? Maybe not in a weird way, but at the time it felt a bit strange. I was kind of proud that I had taken them as far as I had, and historically we had struggled to recruit, particularly for O-line. Half our, some other clubs will say the same thing, but like half our catchment area we feel like is the sea. So we don't, we're not a big city. There's not a lot of reason for people to go off to university and come back to Colchester, of all places. So, we found recruitment was often quite a challenge, but we built something now that people were traveling to get to, that we had a bit of depth at these positions. And the fact that I had felt like I'd been part of building that, I was quite proud of that. And the fact that they felt able to have that conversation with me and know that there were people ready to step up, or that they felt they could get ready to step up. Weirdly, you're kind of proud that you've helped them get there, or you played a small part in some way of getting to that point. So yeah, just a complete mess of feelings. Look, I came home, I don't mind admitting, I sobbed my eyes out for about half an hour, just like, what the hell is this all about? What am I doing now?
Yeah.
It's just, I feel like I want to say it felt like it was taken away from me. I don't think it was taken away from me, but I think I was sort of shown the door to the old folks' home and gone, just we'll help you there when you're ready. And you just think, well, if that's the ethos, maybe I'll go now. It's that I'll go before I'm properly pushed.
Yeah.
The last time I put kit on in a game, I started, I captained, we won. That's not a bad way to finish.
That's good. That's a handy way to kind of.
Do I want the last experience to be losing away at Blackheath Rugby Club and then getting in the car and driving home? No, I don't know.
Bench as well, from the bench.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, maybe. Do I want the last experience in Glad's kit to be one where maybe I don't see the field? No, I don't think I do want that.
So describe. So you've thought, I think that's enough. Can you describe that instance where you go, I quit, or I resign, I retire, however you want to word it? Can you, that feeling, how do you remember verbalizing it, how you felt after it?
Yeah. So the way it panned out for me was it sort of rumbled along for a few weeks, because I part of me felt a little bit obligated. I'd started in pre-season. I was sort of splitting reps with guys, as you do in the pre-season. Get everyone au fait with what's going on. And I got to the point where I'd been to a few sessions, and when the coaches were looking for volunteers, I was always stepping forward, and they were looking over my shoulder and pulling someone else. And I was just like, well, this is starting, isn't it? This is how it starts. Yeah. And so I reached a point where I'd been discussing it with, like, my probably very best mate in the world is a guy called Dave Crane, who I played alongside for a long time. He's now the O-line coach at Colchester, and he and I have been talking about this for a while. And I've been telling him that he's doing a great job training people up and trying to think of new drills to do, and trying to keep training interesting, doing a fantastic job of that. But like I said before, I didn't feel like I was getting stuff from it. There wasn't a lot of feedback. And he's freely acknowledged that. But we'd gone back and forth on it for a while, and I remember I sent him a message saying, like, I think this is it. I feel like if I stuck around any longer, bearing in mind this is pre-season, if I stuck around any longer, I feel like what I'm doing is taking reps away from the person who probably needs them, who's probably going to end up playing that position either at the start of the year or by the end of the year. I think I'd be doing them and me a disservice to stick around in that light. So I think I'm going to call it quits. So I remember he messaged me back and said, I'm glad you've come to a decision. I think to be fair to him, he said he would prefer me to stick around, but he can absolutely see how I've got there, and he can absolutely see why I've got there. And I think he's just relieved that I have made a decision, and this is no longer this cloud hanging over me.
Yeah.
And so I remember I did the same thing. I conveyed it to the HC, who said much the same thing. You get the thank you, mate, you're welcome anytime, and all of that kind of stuff. And that's appreciated. And yeah, I remember I sort of sat there, and again, you shed a couple of tears and think, geez, does that mean it's really over? Is that really how it ends? Sort of sat on your own in your bedroom, messaging people saying thank you, but I'm done.
Yeah.
You know, not the most distinguished way to call it a
But
day, but it felt like the right thing to do,
well,
not the
this is
easy thing.
it. In amateur sport, a lot of the time, that's it. There's no big send off. There's no
No,
nothing, and that's
no,
a lot of
I'm
people
not.
out there will just kind of go,
Mm.
oh, "I'm done. I'm just
Yeah,
not."
look, but don't get me wrong. I'm not asking for the big parade or anything like
Mm.
that. Not at all. I'm not looking for that. It just felt like I remember sitting there on my own quietly and just thinking, geez, 20 years, and this is it. Not it ends in ignominy, not or anything like that. Just it ends quietly. It just ends here. The world. I always say this to my kids: like, it doesn't matter how bad things get, or how embarrassed you are by something at school or something somebody's done. The sun goes down in the evening. It comes up in the morning. The world goes on. Nothing stops. Everything keeps rumbling away. And at that moment, that sort of advice that I pass on never felt quite so prescient. It was just, do you know what? I'm not going to be there. I have always been for 20 years. And now somebody else is going to be there, and it's still going to rumble on. And it took me a while to just sort of reconcile that, just because that was part of the identity. That was part of who I was. I felt in some way maybe the club was a bit of me and I was a bit of the club, and now that's not maybe the case. But they will have a new identity. Maybe I will have a new identity. And I think that was the bit that I struggled a bit with, just because I didn't know what that was going to mean and how that was going to go.
So, I mean, once you've done it, you've kind of made up with yourself. I mean, everyone knows in British American football, Sundays are football days. That's just how it is. It's over the summer. You don't have summer on Sundays anyway. That's it. So, describe to me that first time when you knew it was happening and you weren't there, if that makes sense. You knew the Culture Gladiators were training or playing or whatever, and you were at home. How did that feel?
Well, look, I mean, I've missed training before. We've all missed training for various reasons, but you miss it because of something, because you're doing something. I remember sort of waking up in the morning thinking, I'm not going to do this today, and don't know what else I am going to do, because Sundays have always been football. It was strange. In some ways, it was a bit cathartic. I think it was good to sort of wake up and acknowledge it. I think if I tried to just ignore it, I might have found myself struggling later on in the day. But early on, just going, this is the way the world is now for me. I think that was helpful. I think I feel like we went out as a family and did something together that otherwise we wouldn't have been able to do. I think we probably went out and, I don't know, went swimming or bowling or something. We did something together. And it was lovely, because at the end of the day, I found a way to sort of reconcile it. Well, I didn't do football. You're right, I didn't, and that was normally a problem. But actually, because I didn't do it, I got a chance to do that, and spend a bit of time with the kids and see them laughing and giggling about stuff. And again, cliche, but that sort of made it worthwhile. I think I said earlier, the training had already become a little bit of a struggle. The games were where I really got excited, and so yeah, the first game was a different kettle of fish. I think the first game was
I was
tough.
going to come on to that. So you turn back up, and the game, the Gladiators are playing, and you're not in kit, and you're not on the sideline. You're nothing to do with the organisation anymore. How did that feel?
Terrifying, honestly, terrifying. So first game of the season's home game. I wake up in the morning. I know it's the day of the game, and normally I'm thinking about triple checking my kit, putting the energy drinks together, and making sure I've got everything sorted. Didn't have to do any of that. My wife said, "Oh, what time's the game start? We'll all come along." And I remember saying to her, "I just don't want you to. I just like I'm going to go. I'm going to face this down, but if I turn up and I'm a quivering mess, I need to be able to run. And I need to be able to get, fight or flight will kick in, and I'm going to leg it. And I need to know I can run back to the car and drive away and hide somewhere.
Yeah.
And if you guys are there and I'm in floods of tears and the kids are roaring around and I've got to try and round them up, that's not going to be. I don't think I can manage that. And that's going to sound very dramatic. It's going to sound like a complete, I don't know, like I'm over egging this tremendously. But honestly, I didn't know how I was going to respond. I didn't really like the idea of going. I was really quite nervous about it. But I went. I pulled up and it was crowded, which was nice. I pulled up into the car park, and a great mate of mine, Paul Brunsden, who played for many, many years, he's retired about 8 times. He was striding through the car park with his easy chair, and I thought, I don't think he realised, but at the time I just thought, I can latch on to him. He's someone I can trust and I can be vulnerable with. He's one of my very best friends in the world. And it was just fortuitous he was there at the same time. So I parked the car, hopped out, grabbed my chair, go and sit in a field, and the 2 of us wandered over, and it was about 5-10 minutes after kickoff, because that's when you turn up, so you don't end up chain crewing.
Obviously,
yeah.
Pro level maneuver in Britball. Anyone else?
No, I don't resent. I have no issue with sort of helping out the team, and I would happily do it in future. But just that one, I don't want to turn up, them go, oh, you're chain crewing, and then me be just in bits on the sideline while I'm holding it down. They can't escape, right? Exactly. So that was intentional on my part. But we walked out. We on the way out, there were 3 or 4 other guys, sort of my direct footballing peers who had long since retired. But they were there, and so we ended up just having a bit of a chat and a catch up on the sideline, and didn't really, I guess in the nicest possible way, didn't really pay an awful lot of attention to the football itself. And that was helpful, because it was just mates being together rather than look at what you could have won over there. So that was good. And look, I don't think they necessarily realise it, but there was Brunny and I, and then there was Charles Gregg, who's ever present with his big ginger beard. Joe Stickins, who was a defensive back for us back in 2013 and thereafter. And these are guys who I love dearly and are part of my footballing life. And yet again, they without realising it, massively helped me out in a football context. So it was exceptionally difficult, to the point where they had another home game yesterday, and I chose not to go because the first one was really difficult.
That's what I was going to say. Have you been back since, or was that enough?
I'd like to. And again, people will say I'm being over dramatic and everything else, but I found it really hard. Really hard. That's this is where I speak a bit out of turn, but that's my team. That's the team I helped build. That's the team I helped. I was chairman for many years. I was on the committee for God knows how long. I have advised and I have done the BAFA wrangling, and I have been to the fixture meetings and yelled loudest, and I've done all of those things. And now I'm one of the crowd. I'm one of the periphery. I love them dearly, and I love the club dearly, and I want it to succeed. I want it to be the very best version of itself. And if that doesn't include me, I'm okay with that. But it doesn't make some of these things any easier to swallow and encounter. I've always been, I've said this to you in the past, right? I've always been, oh, it's Tom from the Gladiators, and now I'm not. So what am I? Or that's Tom and he plays American football. How's the American football going? What do I talk about now, right? You have icebreakers in meetings at work. People, oh, tell me something about yourself. It's always been, oh yeah, I play American football. Well, now I don't. Right? Like what? So I mentioned before, like you lose your identity. I have no I don't know what I am anymore. Am I a dad? I guess. Am I a good dad? I hope. But am I like what is my trait? What is my characteristic? If I have to box myself as something, what is it? And I don't know. And that loss of identity is something I am really still struggling to reconcile. I have to be honest.
So I was going to say, so I mean, what is next? For what's the next thing? Obviously, we've kind of touched on you play for the Seahawks Masters,
Too.
And you still, I believe, you're still dabbling cricket.
Yes.
So
yeah, still try and play a bit of cricket.
What's next for Tommy Burridge?
It's a great question. Look, I don't know. I work more than I probably should. I've got this young family. I want to be a dad. I want to be present. I want to be available to them first and foremost. I want to be able to plan to do stuff without having to constantly check the football diary. I spent many years traveling back from holidays early without the family for football, or not going at all and sending my wife off with the kids to places just because I felt an obligation to play football. Like even last year, first game of the season, it was away at Swindon, and my family were over in Estonia, where my wife's from, seeing family there, and and I flew back 48 hours before the rest of them did, purely because of football.
Dedication.
Now, is it dedication? Is it stupidity on my part? I mean, possibly. But I said it earlier. You if you're not around for a training or a game, I felt like I was letting them down, and so I wanted to make the extra effort. And part of the reason I'm struggling with it now is it feels like I feel like I've still got maybe something to offer. So am I letting them down by not being that? Who knows?
One question that I have asked in recent times to somebody: do you regret giving up that time in your life? Do you regret the 48 hours of coming back? Do you regret not going on holiday? Do you regret any of that?
I don't know. It's regret is such a you hear people with those cliches all the time. Oh, don't live your life with regrets. Nothing good can come of that. So I try not to hold on too tightly to some of these things. I wonder what might have been otherwise. Like, some of it, I think, if I hadn't done this, somebody else would. The games would still have taken place. Somebody else would have played my position. Would I have been managed out earlier as a result? Yeah, maybe. So maybe doing all of this is what's extended my career. So I don't look. The experiences are tremendous. I don't know that I would change it necessarily. I have missed moments with the family that I may never be able to get back, but I'm hoping that I can sort of redouble the efforts now and be there when they need me now. I'm conscious that I've not been an absentee father by any stretch, but there have been occasions where I've thrown my kit over my shoulder and jumped in the car, and my wife's been left in. There might have been an awkward situation or a screaming match with a teenager or whatever it might have been. I probably could have played those a bit better, and that it's specific scenarios. Maybe I look back on and go, maybe the outcomes would have been different if I'd handled things a little bit differently. But do I regret anything? What's the point? What's the point in spending too long regretting it?
No, that's fair. So, I mean, you're coming out to Brno in Czech.
Yeah, hope so.
And then we'll keep going with the Masters and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
How long do you want to keep playing with those guys for? How long do you think? I mean, it could be a question that you don't know, but how long do you reckon you've got left in the tank at the Masters level?
Well, I guess I wait till Nick Benning taps me on the shoulder and says, "Oh, we need someone else to play your position." Okay. I don't know. Look, listen, I would love to play as long as you'll have me. To be honest with you, I can see people in that Masters team who, listen, they're there for a bit of fun. If they can get on the field for half a dozen snaps, they'll feel like they've contributed. I get the impression that will be me in a few years, right? I don't need to be ever present right now. I still have that buzz from playing. I still want to be right there in the middle of it. But honestly, it's the most it's the most fun I've had playing the sport for a long time. And I said this to some of the gladiators coaches, but in sort of a weird way, playing with Sealand, particularly it was Civil War this year, was when I kind of said, right, I think that's it with the Glads. And it's because I came away for a weekend for Sealand, and you arrive, you meet up with people, you have a few beers, you talk a lot of rubbish and tell some stories and have some fun. You get to throw on the kit and run around in an environment where it's competitive, but it's not loaded with pressure or expectation. It's fun. You do it surrounded by people who are able and can contribute at a reasonable standard. But the aim is to have fun. And then afterwards, everyone goes and has a shower and then a few pints, and we all enjoy the fact that we've come together. I came back from that Civil War weekend. I'm like, do you know what? That's what I want football to be. And it's not that for Colchester. It's not because it's not full of my mates or anything. It completely is. But it's just league football is a different beast. And I had the same thing. Like, I don't play a lot of league cricket. I play a lot of social cricket. I don't play a lot of league cricket anymore because you've got to be available every week and you've got to be, involved, and you've got to, it's serious. And where are we in the standings? Like, I do these things now. I'm old enough now that I do these things to have a bit of fun. I don't sort of care about the context so much. I find it very hard to get strung up about, a contest going on 100 miles away and what it does to our standing, some arbitrary table.
Yeah.
I want to do it because it's fun.
Yeah.
And so I came back from that Civil War weekend. I'm like, do you know what? I had a lot of fun with people I really like being around. That's what I want it to be. I want it to be that. And if I'm going to round out my football playing days, I know, same as you know, there's going to be a point at which you take that helmet off, and that's the last time you ever take that helmet off.
Yep.
And I don't know when that is. I'm hoping it's not for a while. I don't know when that's going to be, but I'd like it to be, I take the helmet off and I do it while I'm smiling because I'm surrounded by people I love in an environment that's fantastic. And I get that from Sealand. I know I'm going to get that every time I'm with Sealand. And so I want that to be the way I round things out.
Nice. So anything, I mean, we've kind of covered everything, start to finish, and the future. Is there anything you'd want to say to someone that's either thinking of retirement or has retired and doesn't know what to do with themselves? Is there any kind of advice you'd give them?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. Look, I think you've got to, don't be afraid to be a bit vulnerable and talk about how you're feeling. It might be that you feel like you're getting to the end, or you lost a step, or you've lost the love, or whatever it might be. If you're coming to the end, I think just be a bit vulnerable, be willing to talk about it to people. It will help organize your thoughts a bit more and hopefully give you a bit of clarity. So I think don't be afraid. I mean, you could say that about any walk of life, right? Don't be afraid to talk about things. I would say, because one door might be closing on your world doesn't mean that every door is closing. I think invariably there'll be other things that you'll now have the opportunity to do. And the people I speak to who have found their way out of football talk about how joyous it can be to have a Sunday back to do other stuff, right? And it might be family, or it might be a different sport, or it might just be, I can now sit on my backside, light a barbecue and drink a beer, right? It might just be that. Yep. And so I think be open to whatever's next. But ultimately, I think just invest a bit in yourself. I think there's a lot of context to consider, right? I've got a family, I've got, obligations, I've got a house to upkeep, I've got a job to make sure I retain and a mortgage to pay. But sometimes it's no bad thing to take an hour, take a couple of hours to just do something for you to keep yourself interested, engaged, the brain ticking over. For me, you've mentioned it, I still play a bit of social cricket, whether it's the odd weekend game or a midweek crash in a field somewhere. But that sort of couple of hours there and having a chance to go and get a beer with the guys afterwards and sort of shoot the breeze a little bit. That's how I invest in myself. I get a chance to run around. I get a chance to do something else that I enjoy. I've got a bit more time. I can justify doing that now on Wednesdays in the evening, knowing that maybe on Sunday I'm available more to the family as well. So so in amongst ferrying the kids around to whether it's, I don't know, gymnastics or brownies or football or whatever it is they're doing one night to the next, finding a bit of time for me, I think, is important. In the past, that has been football, and that's been Sundays are Dad's day. That's when he goes off to football. Whereas now it's okay. Wednesday nights he does a bit of cricket, or it's goes and hits some balls on a driving range, or whatever it is. Just something that allows me to be a little bit re-energized.
Nice, I love it.
Don't be afraid for that.
Good on you, bud. That's a fantastic way to kind of put it out there and wrap it up. I mean, is there anything else that that you'd want to say to the folk watching before we start kind of calling it for today?
I think really just enjoy the ride while it lasts. It's you never know when it's going to end. Embrace it for what it is. I think this American football, or indeed many other sports, will afford you all sorts of opportunities. I think don't be afraid to thrust yourself forward and stick your hand up and try some of these things, because you just don't know where they're going to take you. Right? I had a guy tap me on the shoulder and say, "You ever thought about American football?" And now I've played in the States 3 times, and I have coached in Europe, and all from ultimately a fairly chance encounter. And look, I'm not the most extrovert, and I'm not the one who's always going to stand up and be the center of things, but by being able to kind of look at an opportunity and work out how maybe I can help something, or how it can help me, I've been able to sort of see a lot of the world and do some things that other people maybe haven't had the chance to. And so be receptive to it, but just don't be afraid to get stuck in and try new things.
Well, it's kind of maybe leads on to a bit of a teaser for what I think you, me, Fryer, and a few others are going to be starting to do, maybe in a few months or something, where we will be going into different sports that maybe aren't as nasty, physical, and brutal as American football or rugby or anything like that. And we have a go at them so that we can tell you exactly how to get into them. So we take out that initial embarrassment and awkwardness for you of turning up and going, what are we doing here? So that's something for us to look forward to. So thank you very much for that, introducing that one. But that's
listen, I walk the kids to school every day past the local bowls club, and I tell you, I come home on a Friday, they're playing lawn bowls. I think, I could take you boys down, right? So those 80-year-olds, I'm coming for them on lawn bowls.
There you go, and we'll be having a go and showing you what you need to wear, how you need to do it, what you need to sign up to. We'll do all that to take all the confusion out for you. But yeah, this has been absolutely wild. This has been incredible. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing and being honest with the kind of the emotional roller coaster you've been on, because it'll be something that everyone goes through and no one wants to talk about. But this is why we have life after the locker room, for you guys out there to kind of see you're not on your own. And if you have been kind of affected, you can contact Mr. Burridge and give him a shout if you want to.
Yeah, please do.
You can always put details in your and anything in the comments or anything like that, and he will, because he's a really lovely bloke, will reply to you and say, okay, this is my experience of that. But if if there's anything a little bit more serious, you can always reach out to the Seahawks. If you send us a pineapple or just an emoji, we're all obliged to kind of look after you, because it's a part of our little contract. But if there's anything a little bit more brutal, maybe go directly to Mind, call 999 for an ambulance or anything like that. Don't be ashamed of it. Speak to whoever. If you want to get counselling, you can do, because there's some cracking counsellors out there. Bev Beckett, thank you very much. I get your name in each and every one of them. I don't care, because I can. But but yeah, so I've been Mike Carter. This has been Life After the Locker Room. Wherever he is, has been Tom Burridge. Massive loves, massive appreciations, bud. Thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure, Mike. Nice to speak to you.
There you go. Thank you very much, folks. Love you. Bye.